All right, so we're here with Dennis Wilson, and it is Sunday, the 10th of July, 2022. And last night we attended the yearly reunion of the Southern California Exceptional Runners. What's the official name of it?
I call it Ralph Cerna's Runners Reunited. He calls it Runners Reunited.
Runners Reunited. And briefly tell me how you perceive that gathering.
This was the 14th year that we've had it. We kind of skipped 1 year because of COVID, and about 20 of us showed up that day, and it was just very low-key. Bars sometimes weren't even open, so we all sat outside. But it started with guys like Dan Enfield, Robert Angel, Huntington Beach High School, Howard Keeley, La Quinta High School, Barry Williams, North Torrance High School, Ralph Cerna, Jose Saavedra, Loera High School, Art Sendejas, Armando Sendejas, Buena Park High School, and that was kind of like the core. I'm sorry if I forget people. That was kind of like the core of the group. Ruth Kleinsasser, now Ruth Wysocki. She's been here since day one.
She's a Southern California girl, right?
Oh God, yeah. Grew up frustrated in high school because there was no girls' sports.
Right. Super talented.
Super
motivated.
Yeah. And came from a running family. So.
The dad was a runner, right?
Yep. And then we had Little Wilson, Colin McConnell. We didn't really have anybody from the San Diego section coming up, any of the Toads or anything like that. The first year there was only, well, I counted today, the photo showed 16 of us at Heroes Bar, where Joey Gomez was the manager of the restaurant and bar. So Joey Gomez also was there. And then there were about another 6 or 7 people that weren't pictured. So there's a total of 24 the very first year. Yeah,
and we're talking about a profile of very, very fast high school runners.
I was probably the slowest of all of those guys. I ran like 4:20 and 9:22 in high school as a senior. And then you got guys like Eric Hulst, deceased. He would have been there. He would have been a natural, but he and Ralph are equivalent, basically.
8:45 2-milers.
Yep.
And that was a 2-mile.
That was 2 miles,
not 3,200 meters. Right.
All the stuff that we ran back in the day was miles and not meters. But Ralph was probably the fastest guy there, and we had Colin McConnell at 8:55. Brian Hunsaker, I think, was there 8:51. Armando, 9 flat.
9 flat.
Art was more of a miler, I think. Howard Keeley more of a half miler. Howard Keeley won CIF at 1:51 when Tommy Lloyd was disqualified, and so that was a big deal.
That's right. He was disqualified, right?
Yeah, and Howard won. Howard was given the title, and Howard in high school ran at 1:51. Blazing.
So
these are, like you said, all of the elites.
The elites,
of
right?
The distance running
in
Orange County.
This meeting, convocation, if you will, was whose idea?
I'm not too sure about the original spark, but Dan Enfield was involved. Ralph was involved as the guy who picked up the reins and really got it going.
Yeah.
And there's another guy I want to not forget. Barry Williams was probably the fastest miler of the original group, 4:06.7 as a junior in high school.
And I'm sorry, what high school did you go to? Barry?
Barry went to North Torrance High School.
Okay.
And most of us met on the weekend AAU road runs. The 2-milers, the 5Ks, the 10Ks. I was running marathons. A couple of the others ran marathons in high school, but not many of them. And then it just grew year upon year.
So the local road races is where you guys actually got together?
Yeah, because we were, as 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds, running, I saw some of my times when we were looking at the book, 17 minutes for a 14-year-old freshman for 5Ks on the roads, where John Weston, he disappeared. He was running 15:40s as a sophomore. So, and that's where I remember seeing teams of Barry, Howard, Robert, myself, and John Weston. Dan Enfield was there at a lot of those things too. So we had a really good core group of guys who were all training and racing together. You heard Chuck talk about groups, and that's something that he and I kind of discovered in our discussions, that yeah, that's really kind of like a common thing, where how did this group get so good? We all trained and raced together and against each other.
Now, how did you organize those training runs as juniors?
All-comers meets. There was a really good group of Costa Mesa High School, Cal State Fullerton, UC Irvine on occasion, and Orange Coast College sometimes, where they had weekly summertime all-comers track meets. So for me, I was 4 miles from Costa Mesa High School, run right up Adams Avenue, turn right, and you're right there. I would run to the all-comers meet, run a few races, run the 3 mile cross country, and then run home.
That's a lot of miles.
But that's where we met guys like Mark Schilling, Mark Jeanette, Joe Rust, some of these guys from Garden Grove High School, Santa Ana High School, who we normally would not have interacted with. We just watched them on the track when we were freshmen and they were seniors. Schilling won the mile at 4:05 his senior year in CIF state meet. And then, so we would all get together at these track meets. And then Coach Taylor from Rancho Alamitos High School, so now we got Jack Martinez and Daryl Hatfield to include into these runners. Coach Taylor organized the summer camps up in Yosemite. And that's where we kind of like coalesced into the big family, because there were like 40 to 50 high school kids. And he had 2 races, a 4.4 mile race and a 1.8 mile race.
And these are cross-country races?
Yeah.
In the mountains, at the camp?
We camped at Yosemite Valley floor.
Yeah.
But we ran every day, twice a day. We ran the 2 races. And one of the things that Taylor did that was unique was he would hand out a piece of paper and a pencil and say, you guys know everybody. You're going to seed. You're going to choose. You're going to pick how everybody finishes in the 4.4. So we did that every
Brilliant.
year. And that's how we got to know each other.
Uh-huh.
So we had all these high-end guys who were motivated because they were training during the summers, going to the all-comers meets, going to the camp. And we had my sophomore and junior year. Schilling was at San Jose State. Jeanette was at San Jose State. And they were camp counselors.
So they're a couple years older than you, and you sort of looked up to those guys. They were inspirations for you.
They were our guys that we looked up to, like you said, and that's who we wanted to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was kind of cool, and that's kind of where some of that grouping started.
I think the fact that that catalyzed a lot of the performances, because you were interacting with each other and competing against each other, training with each other.
We got to train together, but then at the end of the day, twice during that week, we were racing against each other. So everybody knew everybody. Everybody was friends.
Yep.
And it just was some of the best times in high school.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. So your own running career, when did you actually start training, per se?
In the 8th grade, March of 70. I wanted to run the Huntington Beach City recreation meets. The furthest I could run was a 13:20, 3/4 of a mile. So my dad took me to the track at Edison. Both my other brothers were going to Edison. I was still in the 8th grade.
Edison High School?
Yeah, in Huntington. And at the elementary school that I was at in the 8th grade, we had the President's Physical Fitness. I hammered everybody in the 600.
600 yards, right?
Yeah, 600 yards. And we had some really good athletes.
Did that surprise you that you ran so fast in the 600?
It kind of did, yeah. And I couldn't even tell you what the time was.
Sure.
But the fact that I beat these other guys, 2 guys specifically, was interesting to me. So I decided I wanted to run these track meets that were coming up. So my dad took me to the track. We did a time trial. And it was like 4 minutes and 14 seconds or something like that. And my mom kept track of all this stuff in a journal.
Really?
So,
but you still keep a nice journal, don't you?
No. It's all
Oh, you
online
did.
now.
You did.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, I've got all sorts of stuff.
Right.
But then I ended up making it to the city finals and ran. I forget what I ran.
And that's what city finals? What is it?
Huntington Beach City.
Huntington Beach City finals.
Yeah, and so did not go beyond that. And then John Weston and his dad were there. Don Weston sold shoes for Blue Ribbon Sports out of his car. That was back in the day. This is 1970.
Yeah.
So I'm no longer in the city meets. And Don asked my dad, he goes, would he be interested in running a 5K tomorrow? So my dad asked me, how far is a 5K? Well, it's 3 miles. Yeah, I think I've run that far. We can do that. We get to the race the next day and it's a 10K.
Okay.
And it's like, do you still want to do this? And I go, yeah, why not?
You're an 8th grader, right?
I'm an 8th grade.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what I ran. I've got it written down somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like 7th place for the junior high school kids, which goes up to the 9th grade. Well, that's not bad. I was 2 places out of getting hardware. So the following week was a 10-mile handicap race. They had handicap races back here in the day. And because I had only run one of the race, I had no handicap. So I had to start with the scratch runners. So everybody's off already running, and then here comes all the elite guys who were the best runners, and they were going to have the fastest time, so they started at the back. I had no time. I had no handicap, so I had to run with them. And I ran like, I want to say like 57 minutes for 10 miles.
Yeah.
And then the following week was like a 25K.
25K, about 15 miles.
15 and a half miles.
Yep.
And then those were like every other weekend, I think.
So lots of road racing activity down here that you could pick and choose.
Every weekend.
Every weekend you could go someplace for a road race.
Yeah.
That was the U.S., actually AAU at the time, probably.
AAU,
Yep.
now USATF, but it was
Yep.
AAU then.
Yep.
And then I think 2 weeks after the 25K was Palos Verdes Marathon. And it's in the hills, Palos Verdes area, nothing but hills. And do you want to run? Well, are the other guys from Edison going to run? Because I'm still in the 8th grade. Yeah. Okay, I'll go. Ran 3 hours, 3 minutes.
13 or 14 years
I
old?
was 14 years old.
14 years old.
I've been running for 2 months.
13?
303.
I'm sorry, 303.
Yeah.
Okay.
303, age 14, in the hills, and I beat all the kids from Edison High School. And I'm in the 8th grade. So, wow, somebody said, you're not that far off the 14-year-old record. We think the 14-year-old record is like 255, and we looked into it, and it was like 245. So I started training.
Uh-huh.
Got up every morning, ran my 5 miles in the morning, did whatever because by the time I started training for that, I did the 1,000 miles in the summers. Palos Verdes was May. It was right at the end of my 8th grade year. So now I'm going into summer training. I'm training with the kids at the high school. And my dad put us all into the football camp. Summer football training. Lifting weights. Edison was a brand new school. It was kind of interesting. It was great for me. I thought it was great. And then I was doing my 11 miles a day. When school started, I got up in the morning and ran 5 miles on my own. And then went to school. Did the afternoon workout with the cross-country team. And in January, it was January 71, ran Mission Bay and ran 2:43.
That was the record.
That was the 14-year-old.
And you beat the record by a couple minutes.
Couple minutes. And so from day one, I knew I had some talent. But it was fun, and it wasn't like I just decided, like Chuck's first marathon, he just went out, his longest run was 12 miles. I had some longer runs in there. But we had no idea what we were doing. We just ran miles, ran the cross-country workouts. And between seasons, instead of going out for basketball, I trained for the marathon, and because I wanted to play basketball. And broke the record, and came back into the high school getting ready for track.
So that the record, you say, was in May? Or was it?
May was the first marathon at 3:03.
Right.
January.
January, okay.
So it was right after Christmas break. So I had 2 weeks off of hammering miles again, and then we backed off the last week.
And then you started track season, what, in February?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, and tell me about your high school track career.
The benchmark that I had to compete against was John Weston, because he was running really fast times and breaking track world records, 5Ks, 2 miles, steeplechase records. He did a whole bunch of stuff, and he had a whole bunch of records. He was really, really good. So as a freshman, he was our first man, and we had a miler, Mike Alvarez, who could beat me, and then a couple of other guys. But by the end of the year, I was like the 3rd or 4th man on the team. I lettered varsity in cross country.
Freshman year.
Yeah, and then track, John Weston was the 2-miler. And we did a lot of quarters. It seems like we did a lot of quarters, and I got it to where one day we did 20 quarters of 75. Okay, so the goal was to break 10, because I think Weston ran like 10:05 as a freshman. So I wanted to break his time. And league finals ran 9:59. So I just squeaked under the 10-minute mark, which was kind of cool. And lettered varsity again, and did not go on because I ran the 2-mile at league finals instead of dropping down to, back in those days we had A's, B's, C's. A's is varsity, and then we had B's and C's.
Yeah, but league finals would take you to CIF. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I needed to, my goal was to run under 10.
And that was freshman year.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And then you moved on the next year. How'd you do your sophomore year?
Cross country, as a sophomore, halfway through the season, I started beating John, and he disappeared. Just disappeared.
Wow.
He dropped out of school and just totally disappeared. I learned later in life that he might be in Hawaii, and I can't find him. It would be fun to find John. So now it was Mike Alvarez and I were the top runners. We had a bunch of other guys there. And we were never a powerhouse in our league. We had to compete against Costa Mesa with the Old Swang twins, Doug McLean. And we just had a lot of good competition. But as a freshman, though, going back a little bit, that's where I met Dan Enfield as a sophomore, and Robert Angel was a freshman. So that's where I met these guys when we were that young. Sophomore year in track, I only improved by like 5 seconds. I only improved to like 9:55. And then improved a lot more down to 9:29 as a junior. But then we moved. And then again, as a senior, I didn't improve that much.
But your fastest time was 9 what?
In high school, it was 9:22.
9:22.
Yeah.
Still a decent time.
Yeah, when I look at all the guys that were like 9 flat and better, like Zendejas, Ralph, and all those guys, Colin McConnell, Hunsacker, all those guys, my 9:22 is like pretty weak. But when I look at the stuff that we did on the road, I was I was much better at the longer races.
The longer races, right. Mm-hmm.
So I just had this thing for the road, so I couldn't wait to get into college.
What was your next marathon after that second one? Because you had the record. You had some momentum.
Yeah, but didn't run another marathon until I was at Grossmont, I think. Grossmont College. I was training. As a senior in high school, now I was at El Capitan High School in San Diego, in Lakeside. And my competition for cross country and track was Kirk Pfeffer. Kirk Pfeffer ended up being a 2:10 marathoner. He and I are great friends, and we did a lot of training together. And we both kind of had Mission Bay on our minds for January as our seniors. And so for the month of December, my senior year, I put in like 504 miles. Everybody thought that was stupid.
That's a lot of miles.
Yeah. And then I think the marathon date was like the 7th or the 9th or something like that year, and then on the 4th, went on a long run with Colin McConnell, my last long run. Colin was with me, and I felt like I dropped an arch or something, and just overuse.
Yeah.
I had been running, I ran a 25 kilometer and finished like a minute and a half behind Covert and Schmeck. Covert and Schmeck that year at Mission Bay ran, I think, 2:16 and 2:17. Okay. Now, let's say I was 5 minutes behind them at the full marathon distance, because I had the base.
Around 2:20.
I think I would have been around 2:20.
Yeah.
Kirk ran 2:24.
Mission, a good course too.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I broke the record.
Uh-huh.
Same course.
Yeah.
So.
But that was
2:24.
that would have been your third marathon.
That would have been the third marathon, and never got to run it. So mentally,
So you didn't start the marathon. You didn't even start it.
didn't even start it.
Uh-huh.
I was done.
Okay.
So that mentally took me out of the first half of the track season.
Sure.
'Cause I was injured. Took too long to come back.
And that's Grossmont.
That was at El Capitan High School.
Oh, still at El Capitan.
So my senior year sucked.
Oh,
And,
I see.
Ended up running probably my best mile ever. And of course, the splits will tell you otherwise. Paul Becklin was going into the first turn. He got his baton. Patrick Henry, Tom Hunt's teammate. I get the baton, and we're running a mile. Final leg of the distance medley. And at the end of the first lap, I catch Paul. I go 60. My next lap was 64.
Jeez.
So I'm 2:04 through the half.
Uh-huh.
Tied my half mile PR. At 3/4, I was 3:12, which was the same time as our 3/4 guy ran. And Paul and I were just like shoulder to shoulder this entire time. And I just outlasted him to the finish. And I ran 4:20. And we
Decent.
won the race. I think we ran 10:26 that year.
Nice.
So that was a decent time.
Uh-huh.
And that was it for me for the year. I ran 9:22, finished second league in the 2 mile, which I was
Mhm.
not happy with. Because then ran even worse at CIF finals. So I did not have a stellar senior year.
But that's explained by the attempt at the marathon and the marathon training, right?
Yeah, one could say that, and one could just say I just did not. I didn't have it to train mentally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was a huge disappointment.
Yeah.
Because I think I would have run right at 2:20. So that was a huge disappointment.
Yeah, because their fitness level was high, but
Fitness level, my racing level was high.
yeah.
So, because I would race all the time. And if I'm racing against Covert and Schmenk, and I'm not that far back, then yeah, I'm going to be double or 3 times that far back over a marathon, because that last 6 miles is tough. But I still would have been right at the 2:20 pace if I would have run that race healthy.
So you ran a lot of races. What was the motivation to run that many road races?
It was fun. I had a lot of success on the roads, more so than on the track. So